I've never actually come across a watch that has so many details, so many features, and so many design elements that have made me look at them and think, wow. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches, and I'm talking about a watch brand called Nove, N-O-V-E. I do apologise if I'm saying that incorrectly, but that's how I read it from my English perspective. But I've never sort of come across a watch or a watch brand that has so many interesting design elements. You can see when you have a look at their website that they are really leaning into out-of-the-box thinking. They're trying to make watches that have a traditional sort of feel to them, but then have so many other elements to them as well. I've come across their watches before and looked at them and thought, wow, that's really interesting. But it wasn't until they actually reached out to me and said, hey, we love your channel, we'd love to offer you one of our watches to show to your viewers, that I then looked into their website even deeper and thought, I really, really want one of these watches. I'm really excited that they've offered me one of these watches. But because they offered me one of these watches, because the watch I am going to show to you today was given to the channel to show to you guys, you would have seen that sponsored icon pop up. And of course, I'm going to leave a link directly to their website below. But today, I've only just had the watch arrive a couple of days ago, and I've been looking at it and looking at it and looking at it and trying to figure out how many of these things are actually standing out to me? How many things are popping out to me saying, wow, look at this? And they're the things I'm going to share with you today. So, in a first impression style video, let's check out this Atlantean II. So the Nove Atlantean II is a Swiss-made, Sellita-powered 300-meter dive watch with 2 years warranty, which are all very good things, including like this packaging, which is all very nice. But when I actually pulled this one out of the package and I started to look at it, well, I'm going to say that more things stood out to me than I've ever stood out to me on any other watch, because there were 8 things that stood out to me. And that didn't include the package or what came with it, because this particular manual is actually for this particular watch, which is very nice with the warranty cards. Nice little cloth. But when you look on the outside here, we're going to see some bits and pieces for the bracelet. And I'm going to talk about them a little bit more, but I didn't remove these 4 links. These came pre-removed, ready to put back in if required, which is fantastic because I normally remove 4 links. Now I ended up having to remove 5, so it was almost pre-sorted out for my wrist. And I'm going to come back to the bracelet and those sort of bits and pieces a little bit later, but it was the first thing that stood out to me, that obviously stood out to me, and that is how the bezel works, because there is a latch system. You unclick that, and then you unclick the locking mechanism. And that leads me into the second thing that really stood out to me, and this really stood out to me, and that is how the bezel works. Because check out the bezel. The traditional bezel that you're looking at, the black with the dots and the triangle, does not move. What is actually moving is inside and on top of the dial. Let's move it this way so you can see. Now, it took me a little while to figure out exactly what was going on here, because I wasn't sure if there was a little sort of ring going on the side. What I actually think is going on is that there is a complete clear disc hovering over the top of the entire dial and hands with those markers on it. And it gives a really interesting look, because you can't actually see that clear sort of disc. All you can see is those loomed markers move. And when you turn the lights off and see the loomed markers move, it even creates a much more interesting sort of effect. And it was that loom and that movement of loom that was the next thing that stood out to me. And the fourth thing that stood out to me is this crown. Firstly, it's very well made. It is signed, nicely knurled, easy to grab hold of, obviously located at the 4 o'clock, but it's the unscrewing experience. That is the softest unscrewing experience of a crown I've ever had, even on much more expensive watches. Sellita-based movement, which means obviously it has hand winding, which is very similar action to any other Sellita I've had, and of course it's also going to have hacking as well. Cyclops there, meaning it does also have the date complication. Now, I don't think you're going to handle any of the watches from this company without seeing all these interesting design elements, and the design of this case is definitely a big part of that. It is very funky, very interesting, obviously incorporating that latch system, but just when you see how it integrates into the bracelet, just how you can see the main part of the watch or the head of the watch sort of integrate into the base of the case itself is definitely something that stood out to me. Now, the next thing is the bracelet, and let's talk about this bracelet. As I mentioned, came with 4 links already pre-removed, It comes with spare end links which are smaller than the ones that are fitted, so you can actually adjust the end links of the watch. You can then look at the actual bracelet itself and see how nicely integrated those links are together. It does mean it doesn't bend too much, but I can tell you now when it gets on wrist, and I'll show you that shortly, that that is not an issue whatsoever. It also has half links, which means you're going to get a good fit from this one. And hopefully a good fit that's already done since they'd already removed some links. The clasp itself is definitely something that stood out to me as well. And it's unfortunate it's because it has this type of on-the-fly adjustment, which it does feel very solid and very well made, but it's just not my favorite on-the-fly adjustment. And there's something about it that I keep doing, because when I unlatch this, I then go to unlatch this, but that's the on-the-fly adjustment, not how you undo it. It is a friction lock clasp, all milled inside. But it's something that I just keep doing. It's something I need to learn to stop doing. I just find these type of systems, albeit very usable and very strong and very sturdy, I just think visually it's not the best. I would love to have seen that be an internal sort of moving adjustable sort of clasp there. But all of those things almost disappear when you put this watch on, and when you look at the watch from this particular angle, and I'm showing you this particular angle for a reason, and please try to look past my arm hairs when you can see how the bracelet and the case sit down onto my wrist. There is not a single gap all the way along. It almost feels like I'm sort of doing this and it's sort of conforming to my wrist. It is a rather unique and quite a magical experience actually. It feels like I'm being hugged on the wrist gently by this particular watch. But as you can see, it actually fits nicely. That clasp is a little bit chunky, but because the top of the watch is a little bit heavy as well, it actually does help to really balance it out. And although those links aren't really sort of too bendy, as you can see, it conforms perfectly to my wrist. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they go those different end links as well, because if you wanted to sort of sit down a little bit shorter on your wrist, maybe that's why they are there. So I'm really looking forward to actually wearing this one a fair amount, because I think it's just going to have even more features stand out to me as I wear this one. And of course, this just being a first impressions, it was just the things that really stood out to me, and I'm going to be sticking it on wrist for the next 4 to 6 weeks before I come back with a full in-depth review. And I get the impression that's going to be a long review video, because I'm going to be concentrating on lots of different elements of this particular one. But whilst we wait for that particular video, maybe you could watch these 2 videos next.